He looked down at the workbench, where a long, very sharp knife looked tailor-made for what he suddenly had in mind. The pyramid of sorts had been quite clear about the reward of late spells together at the right time, and Trimon was not about to let years of painstaking work go for nothing because someone had a bright idea. He picked up the knife, weighing it for balance and accuracy. I must congratulate you, Master. I can see that we must all get up very early in the morning to get the better of you. The knife left Trimon's hand and plunged with unerring aim towards Galder's neck. It didn't reach it. Instead, it swerved to one side and began a fast orbit, so fast that Galder appeared suddenly to be wearing a metal collar. He turned around. The knife broke away and shuddered at the door, a mere shadow's depth from Trimon's ear. Early. Have a bit more table, said Rinswood. No, thanks, I don't like marzipan, said Flower. Anyway, I'm sure it's not right to eat other people's furniture.
Don't worry,
said Swires.
the old witch hasn't been seen for years.
Do you think I will rob this place? Said Toothflower. Well, it just reeks of ambience. Oh,
What's ambience?
said Swires. I think it's a kind of frog, said Rincewind. And so the night wears on, under a blanket of lowering clouds which covers most of the disk, which is fortuitous, because when it the astrologers get a good view of the sky, they're going to get angry and upset. And in various parts of the forest, parties of the are getting lost and going around in circles and hiding from each other, upset because whenever they bump into a tree, it apologises to them. But unsteadily though it may be, many of them are getting quite close to the cottage. It began to snow. The barley sugar windows of the cottage showed bright and cheerful against the blackness. At one side of the clearing, 3 tiny red points of light glowed momentarily, and there was the sound of a chesty cough, abruptly silenced.
Shut up,
hissed a third-rank wizard.
they'll hear us. Oh well, we gave the lads from the Brotherhood of the Hoodwink the slip in the swamp, and those idiots from the Venerable Council of Seers went off the wrong way anyway.
The leader of the party peered over the rock and watched the cottage.
Right then,
He said, knocking out his pipe on the heel of his 7-league boot, who squeaked in protest.
we rush in, we grab them, we're away, okay?
Rincewind looked carefully at the bed. It was quite a nice little bed, in a sort of hard toffee inlaid with caramel. He'd rather eat it than sleep in it. It looked as though someone already had. Someone's been eating my bed, he said. I like toffee, said Toothflower defensively. There was the tiny, distinctive sound of a nugget door opening. At the same time, from the other side of the cottage came the faintest of tinkles, like a rock smashing a barley sugar window as delicately as possible. What's that? Said Toothflower. Which one? Said Rincewind. There was the clonk of a heavy branch banging against the windowsill. With a cry of "Elves!" Swires scuttled across the floor to a mouse hole and vanished. What shall we do? Said Toothflower. Panic? Said Rincewind hopefully. There's a cupboard, said Toothflower, into a door that was between the chimney breasts. He scrambled into sweet, musty darkness. It was the creak of a chocolate floorboard outside. Someone said, I heard voices. Someone else said, yeah, downstairs. I think it's the Hoodwinkers. I thought you said you'd given them a slip. There was a lot more creaking, and a muffled scream from downstairs, where a venerable seer, creeping carefully through the darkness from the broken window, had trodden on the fingers of a hoodwinker who was hiding under the table. There was more creaking, and something else. After a while, Toothflower said, Rincewind, I think there's a broomstick in this cupboard. piercing shriek from below. In the darkness, a wizard had tried to open the luggage's lid. A crash from the scullery indicated the sudden arrival of a party of illuminated mages of the Unbroken Circle. Rincewind pushed open the door gingerly. The room was empty. He tiptoed across to the window and looked down into the upturned faces of three brothers of the Order of Midnight. "That's him!" He drew back hurriedly and rushed for the stairs. Below, most of the struggling wizards were trying to illuminate the scene by various flames, fireballs and magical glows, so the lighting gave the impression of a disco in a strobe light factory. Absolutely everyone was trying to keep out of the way of the luggage, which had two venerable seers pinned in a corner and was snapping its lid at anyone who approached. But one wizard did happen to look up. "It's him!" Rincewind jerked back, and something bumped into him. He looked around and stared when he saw Two-Flower sitting on the broomstick, which was floating in mid-air. "The witch must have left it behind," said Two-Flower. Rincewind hesitated. Green sparks were spitting off the broomstick's bristles, and he hated heights almost more than anything else. "All right," he said, "but I'll drive." He lashed out with a boot at a wizard who was halfway through a spell of binding and jumped onto the broomstick, which bobbed down the stairwell and then turned upside down so that Rincewind was horribly eye to eye with a brother of midnight. He gave the handlebars a convulsive twist. The broomstick shot forward and broke through the wall in a shower of crumbs. The luggage, with a strange whistling sound, an arrow appeared from nowhere, missed Rincewind by inches, and struck the luggage's lid with a very solid thud. The luggage vanished. Something small and distant broke through the cloud layer, trailing shreds of vapour. In the stratospheric calm, the sounds of bickering came sharp and clear. "You said you could fly one of these things." "No, I didn't. I just said you couldn't." "But I've never been on one before." "What a coincidence." "Anyway, you said, 'Look at the sky.'" "No, I didn't." "What's happened to the stars?" And so it was that Rincewind and Two-Flower became the first two people on the disc to see what the future held. Rimwards, in the direction of great Atuan's travel, the sky had been swept of a red and baleful star. A star like the glitter in the eye socket of a rabid mink. It was small and horrible and uncompromising, and the disc was being carried straight towards it. Rincewind knew precisely what to do in these circumstances. He screamed and pointed the broomstick straight down. Balder Weatherwax stood. Urshalo! Dileptor! Hula! A small at the edge of the magic circle. This next bit's quite impressive, he said. "Watch." "Got by! Got sham! To me, O spirits of small isolated rocks and worried mice not less than 3 inches long!" Balder shut his eyes momentarily, his face a mask of ecstasy. "To me, O spirits of..." There was a thunderclap, an implosion of light, and a moment of complete physical uncertainty during which even the walls seemed to turn in on themselves. Trimon heard a sharp intake of breath and then a dull, solid thump. The room was suddenly silent. The luggage squatted in the centre of the circle and opened its lid. "Rincewind?" Rincewind opened his eyes. Not that it helped much. It just meant that instead of seeing nothing but blackness, he saw nothing but whiteness, which, surprisingly, was worse. Rincewind sat up. He appeared to be on a rock speckled with snow. It seemed to be everything a rock shouldn't be. For example, it shouldn't be moving. Snow blew around him. Two-Flower was a few feet... Two-Flower was a few feet away. Two Flower was a few feet away. Rincewind groaned. "What now?" he said. "You know when we were flying and I was worried we might hit something in the storm, and you said the only thing we could possibly hit at this height was a cloud stuffed with rocks? Well, how did you know?" Rincewind crawled forward until it came to an edge and peered very cautiously over it. Through a break in the clouds, he caught a distant view of jagged-edged mountain peaks. They were a long way down. He gurgled incoherently and inched his way backwards. "Can you smell anything?" he said. "I think it's bacon," said Two Flower. Rincewind stood up on the trembling stone and tottered forward into the clouds. At the front or leading edge of the rock, a small druid was sitting cross-legged in front of a small fire. A square of oilskin was tied across his head and knotted under his chin. He was poking at a pan of bacon with an ornamental sickle. The druid looked up and dropped the pan into the fire. He leapt to his feet and gripped the sickle aggressively. Or at least as aggressively as anyone can in a long wet white nightshirt and a dripping headscarf. "I warn you, I deal harshly with hijackers," he said, and sneezed violently. "Excuse me," said Two Flower politely, "I think your breakfast is on fire." The druid glanced down and flailed ineffectually at the flames. Rincewind hurried forward to help. The shared triumph of actually rescuing a few pieces of rather charred bacon did more good than the whole book of diplomacy. "How did you get here, actually?" said the druid. "We're 500 feet up, unless I've got the runes wrong again." "We saw in as we were passing. I thought we'd run into some turbulence a while back," said the druid. "You?" He shivered. "It must be morning by now," he said. "Sod the rules. I'm taking us up. Hang on." Cloud whipped around them. There was a horrible feeling of heaviness, and suddenly the rock burst into sunlight. It levelled off a few feet above the clouds in a cold but bright blue sky. The rock was about 30 feet long and 10 feet wide and bluish. "I'm a computer hardware consultant," Belafonte confided. "What's a computer hardware?" "Well, this is," said the druid, tapping the rock with the sandal foot. "Part of one anyway. It's a replacement. I'm delivering it. They're having trouble with the big circles up on the vortex plains. So they say, anyway. I wish I had a bronze talk for every user who didn't read the manual." Trimon peered cautiously over the battlements of the Tower of Art, the great spire of crumbling masonry that loomed over Unseen University. "Has it gone?" he shouted. The cluster of students and instructors of magic far below nodded. "Are you sure?" The bursar cupped his hands. "It broke down the hubwood door and escaped an hour ago, sir," he yelled. "Did it get anyone?" The bursar swallowed. It swallowed Galder Weatherwax, sir," he shouted. Trimon brightened. "It's an ill wind," he murmured. He started down the long spiral staircase. The rock swooped across the high plains, whipping snow from the drifts, now a mere few feet below. "Up ahead!" screamed the druid. "Behold, the great computer of the skies!" Rincewind peered between his fingers. On the distant skyline was an immense construction of grey and black slabs, arranged in concentric circles and mystic avenues, gaunt and forbidding against the snow. "It's very nice," said Two Flower. The druid stiffened. "Nice," he said. "A triumph of the silicon chunk, a miracle of modern Masonic technology. Nice!" "Oh, yes," said Two Flower, to whom sarcasm was merely a slowed and hovered over the circle. Down below, a druid waved 2 bunches of mistletoe in complicated patterns, and Belafonte skillfully brought the massive slab to rest across 2 giant uprights with the faintest of clicks. A ladder banged against the side of the slab, and the head of an elderly druid appeared over the edge. "About bloody time," he said. "7 weeks to Hog's Watch Night and it's gone down on us again." Hello, Zachariah, said Bellefonte. What's happened this time? It's all totally fouled up. Today, it predicted sunrise 3 minutes early. Talk about a klutz. Boy, this is it. The ladder and disappeared from view. Tufal followed him. Around the circle, druids were tapping the megaliths with little hammers and listening intently. Arcane phrases floated up to where Rincewind sat. Can't be software incompatibility. The chant of the Troll Spiral was designed for concentric rings, idiot. I say, fire it up again and try a simple moon ceremony. Alright, nothing's wrong with the stones, it's just the universe has gone wrong, right? Through the mists of his exhausted mind, Rincewind remembered the horrible star they'd seen in the sky. Something had gone wrong with the universe last night. How had he come to be back on the disc? He had a feeling that the answers were somewhere inside his head, and an even more unpleasant feeling began to dawn on him that something else was watching the scene below, watching it from behind his eyes. The spell had crept from its lair deep in the untrodden dirt roads of his mind, and was sitting bold as brass in his forebrain, watching the passing scene and doing the mental equivalent of eating popcorn. He tried to push it back, and the world vanished. It was in darkness, a warm, musty darkness. There was a strong smell of old leather and the sourness of ancient paper. The paper rustled. "Rincewind," said a voice. Rincewind had never heard a lizard speak. If one did, it would have a voice like that. Yes? The voice chuckled. "You ought to say, 'Where am I?'" it said. "All right," he said. "Where am I?" "You're dreaming." "Can I wake up now, please?"
No,
said another voice.
we have something very important to tell you,
said a third voice. Rincewind nodded. In the back of his mind, the spell lurked and peered cautiously over his mental shoulder.
And you have a very important task ahead of you.
Huh?
Many years ago, we arranged for one of our number to hide in your head because we could foresee a time coming when you would need to play a very important role.
Me? Why?
You ran away a lot,
said one of the voices.
That is good. You are a survivor.
Survivor? I've nearly been killed dozens of times.
Exactly.
Oh. So what's this task then?
It is very important. You safeguard the spell in your head and bring it back to us at the right time, you understand? So that when the moment is precisely right, we can be said. Do you understand?
Rincewind thought. We can be said? And it dawned on him. I'm in the octavo, he said. And you are the spells? The single red dot glowed in its patch of darkness. Trimon, still wearing the ceremonial robes from his inauguration as head of the Order, couldn't rid himself of the feeling that it had grown slightly while he watched. He turned away from the window with a shudder. "Well," he said. "It's a star," said the Professor of Astrology. "A big star." "How big?" "Bigger than Great Atuin and the disk together." "That is big," agreed Trimon. The word huge comes to mind. "Massive," agreed the astrologer. "And we're going to hit it?" "I'm afraid so, sir." He squinted up again at the red gleam on the horizon. "We can't find Rincewind," he said. "And if we can't find Rincewind, we can't find the 8th spell of the octavo. But we believe that the octavo must be read to avert catastrophe. Otherwise, why did the Creator leave it behind?" "Because he was just forgetful," suggested the astrologer. Trimon didn't hear him. He was thinking about the legend of the Pyramid of Sort, which says that whoever says the 8 spells together when the disc is in danger will obtain all that he truly desires. "Are you all right?" said Two-Flower. Rincewind opened his eyes, sat up hurriedly, and grabbed Two-Flower by the shirt. "I want to leave here," he said, "right now. But there's going to be an ancient and traditional ceremony. I don't care. I want to go home." He found that he had this sudden, desperate longing for the fuming, smoky streets of Ankh-Morpork, which was always at its best in the spring, when the gummy sheen on the turbid waters of the Ankh River had a special iridescence, and the eaves were full of bird song, or at least birds coughing rhythmically. He pushed Two-Flower aside, gathered his tattered robe around him with great dignity, and stepped right off the top of a 30-foot trilithon. Some 10 minutes later, when a worried and rather contrite Two-Flower dug him out of the large snowdrift at the base of the stone, his expression hadn't changed. Two-Flower peered at him. "Are you all right?" he said. "How many fingers am I holding up? I want to go home." "Okay, no, don't try and talk me out of it. I've had enough. I'd like to say it's been great fun, but I can't, and..." "What?" "I said okay," said Two-Flower. "Only I think we should wait until morning." "Why?" "Well, because it's freezing cold, because we don't really know where we are, the luggage has gone missing, it's getting dark." In the deep canyons of Rincewind's mind, he thought he heard the distant rustle of ancient paper. He had a horrible feeling that his dreams were going to be very repetitive from now on, and he had much better things to do than be lectured by a bunch of ancient spells. A tiny dry voice at the back of his brain said, "What things?" "Oh, shut up," he said. "I only meant it's freezing cold and..." Two-Flower began. "I didn't mean you, I meant me." "What?" "Oh, shut up," said Rincewind wearily. "I don't suppose there's anything to eat around here." The giant stones were black and menacing against the dying green light of sunset. The inner circle was full of druids, scurrying around by the light of several bonfires and tuning up all the necessary peripherals of a stone computer, like ram skulls on poles topped with mistletoe, banners embroidered with twisted snakes, and so on. Rincewind stared. What's going on? Apparently, there's this ceremony dating back for thousands of years to celebrate the rebirth of the moon, or possibly the sun. No, I'm pretty certain it's the moon. Apparently, it's very solemn and beautiful, and invested with a quiet dignity. There was a loud blarting noise from a band of bronze trumpets. Rincewind looked around. A line of druids marched slowly past, their long sickles hung with sprays of mistletoe. "Bellefonte explained it all to me," whispered Two-Flower. "We're going to see a time-honoured ceremony that celebrates the oneness of man with the universe. That's what he said." Rincewind looked sourly at the procession. As the druids spread out around a great flat stone that dominated the centre of the circle, he couldn't help noticing the attractive, if rather pale, young lady in their midst. She wore a long white robe, a gold torque around her neck, and an expression of vague apprehension. "Is she a..." said Two-Flower. "I don't think so," said Rincewind slowly. The young woman lay down on the big stone. "They're going to sacrifice her, you must know." "What? To kill her?" "Yep." "Why?" "Don't ask me. To make the crops grow, or the moon rise, or something. Or maybe they're just keen on killing people. That's religion for..." But Rincewind was talking to himself. The chilly landscape outside the circle was not entirely devoid of life. For one thing, a party of wizards was even now drawing near, alerted by Trimon. And for another, a small and solitary figure was lurking in the cover of a handy-fallen stone. One of the Disc's greatest legends watched the events in the stone circle with considerable interest. He saw the druids circle and chant, saw the chief druid raise his sickle, heard the voice. "I say, excuse me, can I have a word?" Rincewind looked around desperately for a way of escape. There wasn't one. Two Flower was standing by the altar stone with one finger in the air and an attitude of polite determination. Then an extremely sharp cutting edge pinked Rincewind's Adam's apple, and a damp voice right by his ear said,
"Shut up and tell me what the other idiot is doing."
The knife at his throat became a hot streak of pain, and Rincewind decided to give logic a miss. "His name's Two Flower. He isn't from these parts."
"Yes, got guts, I'll give him that. Do exactly what I say, and it is just possible he won't end up with them wrapped around a stone."
It was at that moment that the moon, in due obedience to the laws of persuasion, rose, although in deference to the laws of computing, it wasn't anywhere near where the stones said it should be. But what was there, peeking through ragged clouds, was a glaring red star. It hung exactly over the circle's holiest stone, glittering away like the sparkle in the eye socket of death. It was sullen and awful, and Rincewind couldn't help noticing just a little bit bigger than it was last night. A cry of horror went up from the assembled priests. Rincewind felt a knife handle slip into his hand, and the squelchy voice behind him said, "You ever done this sort of thing before?" "What sort of thing?" 2 inches from Rincewind's left ear, a voice broke into a sound like a baboon with its foot trapped in an echo canyon, and a small but wiry shape rushed past him. By the light of the torches, he saw that it was a very old man, with a totally bald head, a beard almost down to his knees, and a pair of matchstick legs on which varicose veins had traced the street map of quite a large city. Despite the snow, he wore nothing more than a studded leather holdall and a pair of boots that could have easily accommodated a second pair of feet. In the excitement that followed, Rincewind sidled along towards the altar stone, holding his knife gingerly so as not to attract any unwelcome comment. In fact, no one was paying a great deal of attention to him. The druids that hadn't fled the circle, generally the younger and more muscular ones, had congregated around the old man in order to discuss the whole subject of sacrilege as it pertained to stone circles, but judging by the cackling and sounds of gristle, he was carrying the debate. Two Flower by the shoulder. "Let's go," he said. "Shouldn't we help?" "I'm sure we'd only get in the way," said Rincewind hurriedly. "At least we must rescue the young lady." He took the knife and hurried up to the altar stone. After several inept slashes, he managed to cut the ropes that bound the girl, who sat up and burst into tears. "It's all right." "It bloody well isn't," she snapped. "Why do people always go and spoil things?" "We just saved you from certain death." "It's not easy around here," she said. "I mean, keeping yourself..." She blushed and twisted the hem of her robe wretchedly. "I mean, staying, not letting yourself be, not losing your qualifications." "Qualifications?" said Two Flower. "I could have been up there with the moon goddess by now, drinking mead out of a silver bowl," she said petulantly. "8 years of staying home on Saturday nights right down the drain." She looked up at Rincewind and scowled, and it may have been the movement reflected in her eyes which prompted him to duck. Something whistled through the air where his neck had been. Rincewind spun round to see the arch-druid readying his sickle for another swing. There was a nasty little fleshy sound, and he fell forward. Behind him, the little man with the long beard pulled his sword from the body and said,
"My lumbago is giving me jip. You can carry the treasure."
"Treasure?" said Rincewind weakly.
"All the necklaces and stuff, all the gold collars. That's priests for you. Nothing but talk, talk, talk. Who's the girl?"
"She won't let us rescue her," said Two Flower.
"Bar that,"
he said, and with one movement picked her up, staggered a little, screamed at his arthritis, and fell over.
"Don't just stand there, you daft bitch. Help me up."
Much to Rincewind's amazement, and almost certainly to hers as well, she did so. A second later, she had the old man slung over one shoulder. From somewhere around the small of her back, a voice said,
"Got everything? Let's get out of here before they come back."
The old man had a large white horse tethered to a withered tree in a snow-filled gully some way from the circles.
"Okay, put me down. There's a bottle of some liniment stuff in the saddlebag, if you wouldn't mind.
Rincewind took the first real look at his rescuer. The man had only one eye, the other was covered by a black patch. His thin body was a network of scars, and currently twanging right tendinitis. "Who are you?" he said. "Bethan," said the girl, rubbing a handful of nasty-smelling green ointment into the old man's back. "I meant him," said Rincewind. One star-bright eye looked up at him.
Cohen is my name, boy.
Bethan's hand stopped moving. "Cohen," she said. "Cohen, the barbarian?"
Very shame. Hang on, said Two Flower.
"Cohen's a great big chap, neck like a bull, got chest muscles like a sack of footballs. I mean, he's the Disc's greatest warrior, a legend in his own lifetime. I remember my granddad telling me he saw him, my granddad telling me he..." "Yes," said Cohen and sighed. "That's right, boy. I'm a lifetime in my own legend." "Gosh," said Two Flower. "How old are you exactly?"
87.
"But you were the greatest," said Bethan. "Bards still sing songs about you." Cohen shrugged and gave a little yelp of pain.
"I never get any royalties," he said. "That's the saga of my life. 80 years in the business, and what have I got to show for it? Backache, piles, and 100 different recipes for soup. Soup? I hate soup."
"Soup?" Bethan echoed. "Soup," explained Rincewind.
"Yeah, soup. It's my teeth, you see. No one takes you seriously when you got no teeth. They say, sit down by the fire, Grandad, and have some soup."
Far out on the snowfield, half a dozen pinpoints of red light glowed in the shadows. "He's not far away," said the leading wizard, peering into a small... Then the wizard who was jumping along in the rear stopped and said, "Listen." They listened. Then they all heard it. A tiny, distant crunching, like something moving very quickly over the snow crust. It was louder now, a crisp rhythm like someone eating celery very fast. That was the last thing they heard, before something fast, hard and noisy cannoned into them out of the darkness and vanished into the night. When they dug one another out of the snow, all they could find was a tight-pressed trail of little footprints, hundreds of little footprints, all very close together and heading across the snow as straight as a searchlight. Cohen suggested that the party should take temporary refuge among the horse tribes of the Hubland Steppes. The soup was above average, he confided, and the natives were particularly adept at natural magic, which could hardly fail to interest a wizard, however dubious his credentials. So they did. Despite the frost outside, the atmosphere of the yurt, or dwelling place, of Britain's grandmother was like a blacksmith's arm. Rincewind was heavily. He dined on horse meat, cheese, horse bread, horse d'oeuvre, and beer that Rincewind did. Then, the old woman across the fire reached down a small wood beside her and rummaged. She found a bottle which she tipped with.
"He says it's essential you drink it,"
said Cohen. He took a swig, aware of all eyes on him. He said. "Actually, not at all bad." Something picked him up and threw him into the air. Except in another sense, he was still sitting by the fire. He could see himself there, a dwindling figure in the circle of firelight that was rapidly getting smaller. Toy figures around it were looking intently at his body, except for the old woman. She was looking right up at him and grinning. "I think we now consider the matter of Rincewind," said Trimon. "And the star," said Jigladworks, leader of the Hoodwinkers. "People are noticing." "Yes, they say we should be doing something," said Lumuel, Panter of the Order of Midnight. "What, I should like to know?" "Oh, that's easy," said Wirt. They say we should read the octavo. That's what they always say. Crops bad, read the octavo. Cows ill, read the octavo. The spells will make everything all right. And there could be something in that, said Drymon. My late predecessor made quite a study of the octavo. We all have, said Panther sharply. But what's the use? Spells to get. Oh, I agree. If all else fails, maybe we should risk it. But the 8 have to be said together or not at all, and one of them is inside this Rincewind's head. Drymon looked along the table. I've sent someone to find him, he said. Wirt snorted. It didn't work out well the last times, did it? That was because we relied on magic. But it's obvious that Rincewind is somehow hidden from magic. He can't hide his footprints. You've sent a tracker? Although Helena the henna-haired harridan would look quite stunning after a good bath, a heavy-duty manicure, and the pick of the leather racks in Wu Han Ling's Oriental Exotica and Martial Aids on Hero Street, she was currently quite sensibly dressed. Riding with her were a number of swarthy men. Helena wasn't too happy about them, but they were all that was available for hire in Morpol. Many of the citizens were moving out and heading for the hills,
getting
out
tired.
of fear of the new star. Helena was heading for the hills for a different reason. Just turnwise and rimwards of the plains, the bare Trollbone Mountains. Helena was trusting to her instincts. This Rincewind, as Drymon had described him, was a rat, and rats like cover. Nowhere was there better cover than on the Trollbones. Rincewind knew he ought to be panicking, but that was difficult because, although he wasn't aware of it, emotions like panic and terror and anger are all to do with stuff sloshing around in glands, and all Rincewind's glands were still in his body. It was difficult to be certain where his real body was, but when he looked down, he could see a fine blue line trailing from what, for the sake of sanity, he would still call his ankle into the blackness around him, and it seemed reasonable to assume that his body was on the other end. Then he saw the faint blue tracery in front of him. He was inside the octavo again. He wondered what would happen if anyone opened the book. Would he appear like a colour plate? I expect you're wondering why we brought you here again, said a voice by his ear. No. No? What did he say? Said another voice. He said no. He really said no? Yes. Oh. Why? This sort of thing happens to me all the time, said Rincewind. 1 minute I'm falling off the world, then I'm inside a book, then I'm on a flying rock. Why should I wonder about anything? Well, we imagine that you will be wondering why we don't want anyone to say us, said the first voice, aware that it was losing the initiative. Rincewind hesitated. Why should anyone want to say you? It's the star, said the spell. The red star. Wizards are already looking for you. When they find you, they want to say all 8 spells together to change the future. They think the disc is going to collide with the star. Is it? Not exactly. But it's most important that you don't let the wizards take the spell from you. Terrible things will happen if all 8 spells are said too soon. Rincewind hesitated. Hang on, he said. You want me to run around keeping the wizards from getting all the spells together. Exactly. That's why one of you got into my head. Precisely. You totally ruined my life. You know that? Said Rincewind hotly. I could have really made it as a wizard if you hadn't decided to use me as a sort of portable spell book. I can't remember any spells. I'm frightened to stay in the same head as you. We're sorry. Now bugger off and do your duty. Not at all bad. Rincewind knew it was himself speaking. He recognised a voice. You okay, Rincewind? Said Cohen. He looks a bit gone there. You did look a bit Right, agreed Bethan. Have I moved at all? He said. You just looked at the fire as if you'd seen a ghost, said Bethan. Rincewind jumped to his feet. Very close in here. Got to have a breath of fresh air, he said. Outside, in the darkness, he filled his lungs. A dark shape crunched over the snow crust. The luggage. You're back, said Rincewind. The luggage rattled its lid. Rincewind again. The next day dawned bright and clear and cold. The sky became a blue dome stuck on the white sheet of the world, and the whole effect would have been as fresh and clean as a toothpaste advert if it wasn't for the pink dot on the horizon.
You can see it in daylight now,
said Cohen.
What is it?
He looked hard at Rincewind. I don't know. Maybe it's a comet or something. Will we all be burnt up? Said Bethan. How should I know? Never been hit by a comet before. They were riding in single file across the brilliant snowfield. The horse people, who seemed to hold Cohen in high regard, had given them their mounts and directions to the River Smile 100 miles rimward, where Cohen reckoned Rincewind and Twoflower could find a boat to take them to the Circle C. Just the ticket if Rincewind wanted to keep on the move. He'd announced that he was coming with them, on account of his chilblains. Bethan had promptly announced that she was going to come too, in case Cohen wanted anything rubbed. 100 yards behind them, hopping rather awkwardly through the soft snow, came the luggage. By evening, they'd come to the edge of the high plains, and rode down through the gloomy pine forests that had only been lightly dusted by the snowstorm. A wild, windy country, the sort where you might expect to find crows, said Cohen, sniffing the air. Rincewind stared around him in the red evening light. Suddenly, rocks that seemed perfectly normal looked suspiciously alive.
I like trolls,
said Twoflower. No, you don't, said Rincewind firmly. They eat.
No, they don't,
said Cohen, sliding awkwardly off his horse and massaging his knees. No?
Your average troll don't want any more out of life than a nice lump of granite maybe, with perhaps a nice slab of limestone for afters. I heard someone say it's because they're a silicus.
Cohen paused and wiped.
Rocks. That's the things.
Why? Said Bethan.
Diamonds. Gotta be, you see. Only thing that can stand the rocks, and they still have to grow a new set every year.
Talking of teeth, said Tinker. Oh, nothing.
Let's get this fire going before we lose the night. The horse people gave us some horse jerky, he went on. If you can find some wild onions and stuff, it might make it taste better.
I'll have a look, shall I? Rincewind said. There were a few early stars out as he wandered off and started to poke among the leaves and grass. Luminous fungi and pleasantly organic, looking like maraculates and gnomes, squished under his feet. Small flying things glittered. Whispered Rincewind.
There's a patch of them by that old village tree,
said a voice beside him.
He's an awful long time with those onions,
said Twoflower. Do you think we'd better go and look for him?
Bushes know how to look after themselves,
said Cohen.
Don't worry.
Bethan was putting his toenails. Right, let's have the other one, she said.
This is very kind of you.
You'd have quite nice feet if only you'd look after them.
Reminds you of what?
Your teeth.
What about them?
snapped Cohen. I can't help noticing that they're not in the same geographical location as your mouth. Not very small.
Large heroes, no sheep. Don't matter what else you lose, you get by with one eye even. You show a mouthful of gums, you know it's unspent.
I do, said Beckham Bailey. Why don't you get some more? Said Toothless.
Well, I was a shark for some years on grocery,
said Cohen sarcastically. Oh no, you buy them, said Toothless. Look, I'll show you. See? He said. Bethany heard Cohen gasp.
You can take yours out? Oh yes, I've got several sets. Excuse me.
It was a swallowing noise, and then, in a more normal voice, Toothless said, It's very convenient, of course. Lots of people wear them where I come from. It's a... But Toothless' lecture on dental appliances went ungiven, because somebody hit him. The disk's little moon toiled across the sky. It was crowded with assorted lunar goddesses who were not, at this particular time, paying much attention to what went on the disk. Had they looked down, they would have seen Rincewind talking urgently to a bunch of rocks. Trolls are one of the oldest life forms in the multiverse, dating from an early attempt to get the whole life thing on the road without all that squashy protoplasm. Individual trolls live for a long time, hibernating during the summertime and sleeping during the day, since heat affects them and makes them slow. At night, in winter, it's a different story.
So, you're Rincewind the Wizard,
said the nearest one, grinning at him with a mouth full of diamonds. His voice sounded like someone running over gravel.
I dunno. I thought you'd be taller. Perhaps he's eroded a bit,
said another one. Rincewind shifted awkwardly. He was pretty certain that the rock he was sitting on was changing shape, and a tiny troll, hardly any more than a pebble, was sitting companionably on his foot and watching him with extreme interest. Legend? What legend?
When the red star hits the sky, Rincewind the Wizard will come looking for us. Do not bite. It is very important that you help him stay alive.
That's it, said Rincewind.
Yes,
said the troll.
we're rather glad you came along,
said the first troll, which Rincewind couldn't help noticing was the biggest one there.
We're a bit worried about this new star. What does it mean?
I don't know, said Rincewind.
It's getting bigger,
Said another troll.
look at it now, bigger than last night.
Rincewind looked. It was definitely bigger than last night. The head troll stood up with a noise like coal rattling down a chute, stretched its thick knobbly arms.
I'm Quartz,
It said.
that's Chrysoprase over there, and Brachia, and Jasper, and my wife Beryl. She's a bit metamorphic, but who isn't these days? Jasper, get off his foot. We'll just find those onions and take you back to your camp.
The troll band moved very quickly, but also very quietly, big round shapes moving like wraiths through the night. Only the occasional flat squeak of a night creature who hadn't heard them approaching marked their passage. They halted eventually in front of the scuffed remains of a fire smouldering in the darkness.
It looks like it's been a fight,
Said Beryl. They're all gone, said Rincewind. He ran to the edge of the clearing. The horses, too, even the luggage. Said Quartz, kneeling down.
That red watery stuff you have in your insides. Look. Blood. Is that what it's called?
Rincewind scuttled about in the manner of one totally at his wit's end, peering behind bushes in case anyone was hiding there. He tripped over a small green bottle. Cohen's liniment, he moaned. He never goes anywhere without it.
There's a trail. Quite a lot of horses.
He looked up at the nearby hills, where sheer cliffs and dangerous crags loomed over the moonlit forests.
Old Grandad lives up there,
he said quietly. There was something about the way he said it that made Rincewind decide that he didn't ever want to meet old Grandad. Dangerous, is he?
He's very old and big and lame. We haven't seen him about for years,
said Quartz.
Centuries,
corrected Beryl.
It just happens sometimes that a really old and weak troll will go off by himself into the hills and the rock takes off.
2 miles away, a string of horses trotted through the night. 3 of them carried captives, expertly gagged and bound. A 4th pulled a rough traveller's, on which the luggage lay trussed and netted. Irena softly called the column to a halt and beckoned one of her men to her. "Are you quite sure?" she said. "I can't hear anything." "Okay, you good?" Troll. "Maybe a better option than blundering around at night." Done up there'd been. Went across the gang of mercenaries. And like in the entrance. The absolute men that said Paul's Hall in like velvet era quality. Why?
But here, effect on a rand.
Let's hope he doesn't find it then, Rincewind said fervently. Quartz sighed.
Not much chance of that, he said. They've lit it in his mouth. It's a judgment on me,
moaned Cohen. He tugged ineffectually at his bonds. Two Flower peered at him muzzily. Gansia's slingshot had raised quite a lump on the back of his head, and he was a little uncertain about things, starting with his name and working upwards.
I should have been paying attention,
said Cohen.
and not listening to all this talk about your wash names. You're dangerous. I must be getting soft.
He levered himself up by his elbows. Helena and the rest of the gang were standing around the fire in the cave mouth. The luggage was silent. Rince floated up in the darkness. "Hey!" he said. "Wow!" shouted Rince. "Oh! Starring and the fire. There's troll. Everyone knows from Helena. Absolutely. Desperately. Only Pacific troll. On his tongue! Then the floor moved. Old Grandad awoke very slowly from his centuries-old slumber and found a hot, ashy taste in what, after a certain amount of thought, he remembered as being his mouth. He began to get angry. Commands skittered along neural pathways of impure silicon. Deep within his silicaceous body, stone slipped smoothly along special fracture lines. Trees toppled, earth split as fingers of the ships unfolded and gripped the ground. Two enormous rock slides lie on his face, marked eyes crusted open. Arena, with great mind, she ran to the old Grandad's lip and jumped, rolling as she hit the earth. The men followed her, cursing. They landed among the debris. Inside old Grandad's mouth, the abandoned prisoners were doomed, or would have been, had not the sun risen at precisely that moment. Whereupon, old Grandad immediately turned back into a rock face, wearing, it must be admitted, an expression of high indignation. When the dust had settled, the prisoners untied themselves and persuaded the luggage to charge one of old Grandad's front teeth, which, inconveniently but understandably, were tightly clenched. The luggage succeeded in breaking through, showering diamond shrapnel in all directions, much of which the thrifty Cohen salvaged before the party clambered down the steep escarpment into which their overnight host had been transformed. At the bottom, they were reunited with the thankful Rincewind and continued on their way, yea, gladly rejoicing. That evening, before the moon had risen, the star was a lurking glow on the horizon. "It's circular now," said Bethel. "It looks like a tiny sun. I'm sure it's getting hotter too." "Don't," said Rincewind, as if we hadn't got enough to worry about. "And another thing," said Cohen, who was having his back massaged. "Bethel and I are getting married." "We thought you ought to be the first to know," said Bethel. "Just as soon as we find a town where there's a priest. We want a temple." Two Flowers said, "To marry?" "Sure thing. Any objections?" "Well, no, of course not, but I mean, she's 17. You're of the elderly persuasion." "So am I settled down, you mean?" Rincewind broke the words. "You're 70 years older than her, Cohen. Are you sure that..." "Oh," said Cohen slowly. "I see what you mean. Strange. I hadn't looked at it like that." "Well, so to be expected," conceded Rincewind. Cohen clapped him on the shoulder. "Sometimes we just have to take risks," he said. "Don't be offended, but I think we'll go ahead with the wedding anyway, and, well," he looked at Bethan and sighed, "we'll just have to hope she's strong enough." Around noon the following day, they rode into a small, mud-walled city. There seemed to be a lot of traffic going the other way. "Plague?" said Rincewind, stopping a man pushing a handcart full of children. He shook his head. "It's the star, friend," he said. "Haven't you seen it in the sky?" "We couldn't help noticing it, yes." "They say that it'll hit us on Hogswatch night, and the seas will boil, and the countries of the Disc will be broken, and kings will be brought down, and the cities will be as lakes of glass," said the man. "I'm off to the mountains." "That will help, will it?" said Rincewind doubtfully. "No, but the view will be better." They left their horses at an inn and strolled around the town. Cohen kept peering at merchant signs until he said, "This is what I've been looking for. You find the temple and the priest, I'll join you shortly." "The jeweller?" said Rincewind. "It's a surprise." "I could do with a new dress too," said Bethel. "I'll steal you one," he promised as they went on without him. There was something very oppressive about the city, Rincewind decided. There was also something very odd. Almost every door was painted with a large red star. "It's creepy," said Bethel. "It's as if people wanted to bring the star here." Or keep it away, said Two Flower. That won't work. It's too big, said Rincewind. He saw their faces turned towards him. Well, it stands to reason, doesn't it? He said lamely. No, said Bethan. This star is different, said a voice. Great Atuin has climbed the beach of the universe. This is the great ocean of space. How do you know? Said Two Flower. Know what? Said Rincewind. What you just said about beaches and oceans. I didn't say anything. Yes, you did, cried Bethan. We saw your lips going up and down and everything. Rincewind shut his eyes. Inside his mind, he could feel the spell scuttling off to hide behind his conscience and muttering to itself. All right, he said. No need to shout. I don't know how I know. I just know. Well, I wish you'd tell us. They turned a corner into a street which was full of people with red stars painted on their foreheads. A man around and scowled at the newcomers. You look like a wizard, he said, in a tone of voice that suggested this was very unwise and quite possibly fatal. Who? Me? No, I'm a clerk. Yes, a clerk. That's right, said Rincewind. He gave a little laugh. Several other star people crowded round. We killed our wizards, said one of the men. Some ran away, but we killed quite a lot. Rincewind stared. You look like a wizard. Rincewind became aware that the three of them were now backed up against a wall in a contracting circle of grey-faced, red-starred people. The luggage, he could see no sign. He raised his hands in the classic pose he'd learnt years before and rasped, "Stand back, or I'll fill you full of magic." The magic has faded, said the man. The star has taken it away. All the false wizards said their funny words and then nothing happened, and they looked at their hands in horror, and very few of them in fact had the sense to run away. I mean it, said Rincewind. The spell stirred in his mind. He felt it trickle into his brain like iced water and brace itself. A cold tingle coursed down his arm. His arm raised of its own volition, and he felt his own mouth opening and shutting, and his own tongue moving as a voice that wasn't his, a voice that sounded old and dry, said syllables that puffed into the air like steam clouds. Octarine fire flashed from under his fingernails. It wrapped itself around the horrified man until he was lost in a cold, spitting cloud that rose above the street, hung there for a long moment, and then exploded into nothingness. His friends departed, under their own steam, so to speak. Rincewind stared at his hand. I can do it! He shouted wildly. Just you all watch out! He's in shock, said Two Flower. Why? He's never done a spell before, but he's a wizard. It's all a bit complicated, said Two Flower. There was the faintest of sounds behind him. Not so much a sound, in fact, as a change in the texture of the air. Where there'd been a plain brick wall, there was now a big glass window full of strange wares, and a beaded doorway, and a large sign above it all which said, after its characters had finished writhing into position, Skillet, Wang, Yuritsut, Bunglestiff, Umlad, and Patel. Established various purveyors. The jeweller turned the gold slowly over the tiny anvil, tapping the last strangely cut diamond into place. How much trolls talk, you say? Yes, said Cole. And as I say, you can have all the rest. Very generous, murmured the jeweller, who was dwarvish and knew a good deal of this. He sighed. Not much work lately? Said Cole. He looked out through the tiny window and watched a group of empty-eyed people gathered on the other side of the narrow street. Time's up, I guess. Who are all these guys with the stars painted on? Said Cole. Madam. You see, they should do no work because the star comes. I tell them stars have never hurt me. Cohen nodded thoughtfully. The 6 men detached themselves from the group and came towards the a series of grunting noises. The door burst open. The men strode in. Their leader pushed Cohen aside disdainfully and picked up the dwarf by his shirt.
"We told you yesterday, small stuff," he said. "You go out feet down or feet up, we don't mind. So now..."
Cohen tapped him on the shoulder. The man looked round irritably.
"What do you want, Grando?"
Cohen paused until he had the man's full attention. And he smiled. It was a slow, lazy smile, unveiling about 300 carats of mouth jewel that seemed to light up the room. "I will count to 3, he said, with unprecedented clarity and in a friendly tone, of course. 1, 2. His bony knee came up and buried itself in the man's groin with a satisfyingly meaty noise. 3. He told them all back on the floor. He looked up at the other men and flashed his incredible smile. They backed towards the door, then turned and ran. Cohen felt his jaw experiment. Donahue seemed to be settling in quite well. "If I was you, I'd be getting out of here," he said. The dwarf was already scuttling around the room, tipping trays of precious metal and gems into a leather sack. "Right," he said, "I'm ready. You're coming with me? As far as the city gates, if you like." They stepped out into the afternoon sun in a deserted street. When Cohen opened his mouth, little pinpoints of bright light illuminated all the shadows. "I've got some friends around here to pick up," he said, and added, "I hope they're all right. What's your name?" "Lackjaw." Cohen and Lackjaw combed the city in search of his companions. A fruitless quest, until they turned into an empty cul-de-sac. Empty, except for an old box someone had left it. Cohen stared at it. Lackjaw watched him creep stealthily around the box, or as stealthily as is possible with joints that creaks like a ship under full sail, and prod it once or twice with his sword, but very gingerly, as if he half expected it to explode. "It's just a box," the dwarf called out. "What's so special about a box?" "I think it's worried about something," said Cohen. "Well, it would be, wouldn't it?" said Lackjaw. "I expect it just wants us to go off somewhere and leave it alone. I think it's very puzzled," Cohen added. "Oh yes, it certainly looks puzzled," said the dwarf. "All right," said Cohen. "I know you and me don't see eye to eye, but we're all trying to find someone we care for, okay?" said Lackjaw, who realised that Cohen was talking to the box. "So tell me where they've gone." As Lackjaw looked up, the luggage extended its little legs, stood up, radiating extreme bafflement. "Sure," said Tooflower. "Anyone here?" said Bethan. Said Rincewind. "I think we ought to sit him down somewhere and get him a glass of water," said Tooflower. "There's one here." "There's everything else," said Bethan. The room was full of shelves, and the shelves were full of everything. Things that couldn't be accommodated on them hung in bunches from the dark and shadowy ceiling. Boxes and sacks of everything spilled onto the floor. "Would you look at this?" Tooflower looked. Bethan was holding it was a little mountain chalet, but with seashells stuck all over it, and then open so that cigarettes could be kept in it, and played a tinny little tune. "I think it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," Tooflower said. A head appeared over the edge of the counter. It looked angry. "I hope you were intending to pay for that." "How much?" said Tooflower, reaching into his pockets. His face fell. "Actually, I haven't got any money," he said. "It's in my luggage, but I was a snort." The head belonged to a very small man, almost hidden behind a green apron. He seemed very upset. "No money," he said. "You come into my shop." "It's magical, isn't it?" said Bethan firmly. "Your shop?" The small shopkeeper hesitated. "Yes, I'd like to bet a bit." Rincewind was still absorbed in his recent triumph. Magic! So that's what it felt like. No wonder wizards didn't have much trouble with sex. Rincewind knew what orgasms were, of course. He'd had a few. So bright fire and raw magic blazed forth from its fingers. It filled you and lifted you, and you surfed down the rising, curling wave of elemental force. No wonder wizards fought for power and so on. The spell in his head was doing it no longer. He was really getting to hate this spell. He was sure that if he hadn't frightened away all the other spells he tried to learn, he could have been a decent wizard in his own right. Somewhere in Rincewood's battered soul, a worm rebellion flashed up back. Right, you're going back into the Octavo first chance I get. He switched his attention to more mundane matters. Right, the shopkeeper was saying testily. It's a magical shop, yes. It moves around, yes. No, I'm not telling you why. Things not so good in the star shop business, said Rincewood. The man shuddered. These people hereabouts, the ones with these star things painted on their faces, well, I hardly have time to open the store and they're threatening to burn it down. Too magical, they say. So I say, of course magical, what else? Go to some other universe, there's plenty around, said the shopkeeper. Thanks for telling me about the star, though. Can I drop you off somewhere? The spell gave Rincewood's mind a kick. No, he said. I think perhaps we'd better stay to see it through, you know. You're not worried about this star thing, then? The star is life, not death, said Rincewood. How's that? How's what? You did it again, said Two Flower. You say things and then don't know you've said them. I just said we'd better stay, said Rincewood. You said the star was life, not death, said Two Flower. Your voice went all crackly and far away, didn't it? He turned to the shopkeeper for confirmation. That's true, said the little man. I thought his A's crossed a bit too. It's the spell, said Rincewood. It's trying to take me over. It knows what's going to happen, and I think it wants to go to Ankh-Morpork. I want to go too, he added. Is that a big city on the Ankh, sprawling place? Smells of cesspits? Asked the shopkeeper. It has an ancient and honourable history, said Rincewood, his voice stiff with injured civic pride. That's not how you described it to me, said Two Flower. You told me it was the only city that actually started out decadent. Rincewind looked embarrassed. Yeah, but well, it's my home, don't you see? Can you get us there? He asked the shopkeeper. I think so. Two Flower followed him through the dark. On the other side was a room with a small bed, a rather grubby stone, and a three-legged table. The shopkeeper did something to the table. There was a noise like a cork coming reluctantly out of a bottle, and all at once the room contained a wall-to-wall universe. You'll be frightened, said the shopkeeper as stars streamed past. I'm not frightened, said Two Flower, his eyes sparkling. No, said the shopkeeper, slightly annoyed. And you could go anywhere? No, said the shopkeeper, deeply shocked. There'd be no point in going somewhere with insufficient per capita disposable income. There's got to be a suitable reward, of course. Stars gleaming like diamond dust, or as people would say, like great balls of exploding hydrogen. The shadow starts to blot out the distant water. It's black over the space itself. This shape blotting out the sky like the it's a tunnel 10,000 miles long with its brutal light pierced to its heart. Great figures rise and fall across the space into strange shapes. Above it, the Discworld swine towards the sky. As it leaves the three deeps of space, despite the tormenting pressures of the seven shadows. Magic is weak again, water on the world. Many more days of this, and the Discworld will be stripped away by the pressures of reality. Gratitude is this. Gratitude is brilliant eyes, glowing red in the light of the dwarf star, not focused on it. It's magic gorgeous space. Yes, but where are we? Said Two Flower. The shopkeeper shrugged. We're in a cotangent incongruity, I believe. This shop generally knows what it's doing. I mean, you don't. You could pick up here and there. The shopkeeper blew his nose. He turned a pair of small, sad eyes on Two Flower. You've got a caned face, sir. I didn't mean telling you. Telling me what? It's no life, you know. Remained in the shop, never settling down, always on the move, never closing. Why don't you stop there? That's it, you see, sir. They can't. I'm under a curse, I am. Cursed to run a shop? There was this sorcerer, you see. I did a terrible thing in a shop. I can't remember it. I gave sucking in. I see. Even so, that's not all. Right? I told him there was no demand for it. After making the sucking noise, yes, he probably grinned too. Oh dear. You didn't call him Squire, did you? He may have done. Here's more. Surely not. Yes, I said I could order it and he could come back the next day. That doesn't sound too bad. Next day, it was early closing day. Oh. I heard on the door handle and they laughed. Laugh? Yes. Like this. Probably to do, said Two Flower, shaking his head. I heard him shouting something about never closing again and lots of words I couldn't understand, and then the shop came alive. You've wandered like this ever since. Yes. Hold on, it's thinking about something, said Cohen. Blackjaw looked up wearily. It had been quite nice sitting here in the shade. He just worked out that in trying to escape from a city of crazed madmen, he appeared to have allowed one madman to give him his full attention. He wondered whether he would live to regret this. Cohen sidled up to the luggage and then flung himself astride it. He took no notice. Hurry up, he said. I think it's going to go. Blackjaw shrugged and climbed on Ginger. Oh, he said. And how does it go? Enemies would agree that if you had to liken Angkor to anything, then it might be covered with the disease secretion to the dying mollusk. No city in the multiverse would rival Angkor for its smell. Which explains why, when the shop finally materialised in a portal, Rincewind sat bolt upright and said, "We're here." Bethel went pale. Two Flower, who had no sense of smell, said, "Really? How can you tell?" Wind peered up and down the empty street. Maybe it was true that it was the start of there. Perhaps it had a spell in his head so long it built up some kind of psychic immunity, and he found he could resist it. "We're in the docks," he declared. "Just smell that sea air." Two Flower turned to the shop. "Sorry we didn't buy anything. All my money's in my luggage," he said. The shopkeeper pushed a bag into his hand. He darted back into his shop, the bell jangled, and the shop faded into the brickwork as though it had never been. Two Flower reached out gingerly and touched it. Not quite believing it. "What's in the bag?" said Richmond. Two Flower pulled out the contents. "A household shelter. It's very useful," said Two Flower. "You can keep cigarettes in it." "No," said Rincewind. He settled down the street. "Where to?" said Two Flower. "I'm seeing university, of course." Is that wise? "Probably not, but I'm still going." Rincewind paused, his face a mask of pain. He put his hand to his ears and groaned. "Smell giving you trouble?" "Try nothing." Rincewind grimaced. "I'm gonna get rid of this thing." distant chanting and the stamping of many feet. "Do you think it's Star People?" said Bethan. The lead marchers came around a corner 100 yards away, behind a ragged white banner with an 8-pointed star on it. "Not just Star People," said Two Flower, "all kind of people." The crowd swept them up in its passage. One moment they were standing in the deserted street, the next they were perforce moving with a tide of humanity that bore them onwards through the city. Torchlight flickered easily on the damp tunnels far under the university as the heads of the 8 orders of wizardry filed onwards. Trimon was leading the party. He was thinking about the bottle of oil in his belt and the 8 keys the wizards carried, 8 keys that would fit the 8 locks that changed the octavo to its lectern. He was thinking that old wizards who sense that magic is draining away are preoccupied with their own problems and are perhaps less alert than they should be. He was thinking that within a few minutes, the octavo, the greatest concentration of magic on the disc, would be under his hands. They came to a lead-lined door set in the stone. Trimon gave the lock a squirt of oil, inserted the key, turned it. "Are we of one resolve?" said Trimon. There was a series of vaguely affirmative grunts. He pushed at the door. A warm gale of thick and somehow oily air rolled over them. The air was filled with a high-pitched and unpleasant chittering. Tiny sparks of octarine fire flared off every nose, fingernail and beard. The wizards, their heads bowed against the storm of randomized magic that blew out of the room, pushed forward. Half-formed shapes giggled and fluttered as the nightmare inhabitants of the dungeon dimensions constantly probed, with things that passed for fingers only because they were at the ends of their arms, for an unguarded entry into the circle of firelight that passed for the universe of reason and order. Even at this bad time for magical, even in a room designed on all magical vibrations, the octavo was still crackling with power. There was no real need for the torches. The octavo filled the room with a dull sun light. The opposite of light. Darkness is the opposite of light, simply its absence. And what was radiating from the book was the light that lies on the far side of darkness. A light fantastic. As has been noted before, the octavo was chained to a lectern carved into the shape of something that looked alien, reptilian, and horribly alive. 2 glittering eyes regarded the wizards with haunted hatred. Trimon pulled a scroll out of his belt and unrolled it. "Bring that torch here," he said, "and put that cigarette out!" He waited for the explosion of infuriated pride, but none came. Instead, the offending mage removed the dog end from his lips with trembling fingers and ground it into the floor. Trimon exulted so he thought, "Do what I say. Just for now, baby. Just for now," he said. He peered at the crabby writing of the wizard long dead. "Right," he said. "Let's see. To appease it, the thing that is the guardian." The crowd surged over one of the bridges that linked Warhawk with Ankh. Below it, the river was a mere trickle which steamed. The bridge shook under their feet rather more than it should. Strange ripples ran across the muddy remains of the river. A few tiles slid off the nearby house. "What was that?" Ben looked behind them and saw the star was rising. Its own sun scurried for safety below the horizon. The great bloated ball of the star climbed slowly into the sky until the whole of it, several degrees above the edge of the world, Rincewind to the safety of the doorway. The crowd hardly noticed them, but ran on, terrified as lemmings. "The star's got spots on," said Two Flower. Said Rincewind. Things going around the star, like the sun goes around the disc. Closer in Winston. Because he paused. "I nearly know." "Know what?" "I've got to get rid of this spell." "Which way's the university?" said Bethan. "This way," said Rincewind, pointing along the street. "It must be That's where everyone's going. I wonder why, said Two-Flower. Somehow, said Rincewind, I don't think it's to enroll for evening classes. In fact, the university was under siege. Out and get rid of the star, or B, and this was the demand favoured by the star people, that they should cease all magic and commit suicide in good order, thus ridding the disc of the curse of magic and warding off the terrible threat in the sky. The wizards on the other side of the walls had no idea how to do A and no intention of doing B. What reliable magic still remained in the university was being channeled into keeping the great gates secure. It's hopeless, said Bethan. We'll never get in. Where are you going? For a walk, said Rincewind. He was setting off determined.